Patrick O'Connell will be leading this session. So could you please come to the stage?
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's pretty clear to all of us that we're witnessing something very rare and historic in culinary history. And I couldn't be happier to be here with you today and welcome you to our next roundtable, which is a discussion on taste, experience, and flavor, a somewhat all-encompassing topic. But I'm sure that the distinguished minds that we've assembled will address it brilliantly and intrigue us with their thoughts on the global influence of Japanese cuisine and culture. Michael Booth is a journalist and author of several books, including Sushi and Beyond, which has been adapted into a Japanese television animated series, which I wish we could all have a chance to see, but maybe when we go home we will. He recently won the British Guild of Travel Writers Book of the Year Award for his book, The Almost Nearly Perfect People. So we're going to ask Michael to join us and share 15 of his most memorable food discoveries in Japan. Please welcome Michael Booth.
Patrick, thank you. Thank you, nice to meet you.
Do you want to speak from the table?
No, I'll be here.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Okay.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with the rock stars of the hospitality industry from around the world. My name is Michael Booth. I'm from England. I'm a journalist, food and travel writer. Basically, today I'm going to show you some of my holiday snaps. I've been visiting Japan regularly for about 10 years, since I wrote that first book about Japan, Sushi and Beyond, always to eat and to research Japan's amazing food culture. And early on I discovered, it seems to me it's based on 4 key principles of seasonality, regionality, quality of produce, and simplicity. And these are the 3 things that I really became fascinated with in Japanese food. So I wrote a book. How does this work? Oh, there we go. That's me as a cartoon. Yeah, I wrote this book, Sushi and Beyond, for the British market, really to explain to the English a little bit about Japanese cuisine. Then bizarrely, a few years after it came out, and it did quite well, won an award in the UK and then was kind of forgotten about, but the Japanese didn't forget about it, and it, to my astonishment, was translated into Japanese and became a bestseller here. And then this year it's just been published in the States. They're always a little bit slow to catch up with things in the USA. So finally it's come. I understand it's not going so well with the whole democracy experiment either. But so that was a wonderful surprise for me because it just basically meant I could return to Japan. I had many more excuses to come back to Japan. The original book is about a trip I took through the food culture of Japan with my family from Hokkaido in the north all the way to Okinawa in the south, researching food stories. So if it was unexpected that it became a success in Japan as a book, as you've seen, becoming a cartoon character was even more surprising, still deeply surreal. I know what you're thinking. His cartoon version is better looking than he is and has more hair, but that was nothing to do with me. So NHK, the national broadcaster, turned my book into a 25-part animated series. And again, the best thing about this is I now have had a chance this year to travel again the length of the country, this time from Okinawa in the south to Hokkaido in the north with my family, researching a new book, which is going to be called The Meaning of Rice and is going to come out next year, 10 years after the original book, and of course so much has happened within Japanese food culture in that time. I have a very short amount of time to talk to you guys, so as I said, I am going to show you some of my holiday snaps from this year. I thought, what's the most useful and interesting thing I could tell you guys today? And rather than talk about my philosophy and creativity, neither of which I have, I thought I'd just show you some really interesting stuff I discovered on my trip through Japan this year. So here goes. I've chosen, I think there's about 15 things, in no particular order. This is umibudo, an amazing seaweed from Okinawa. Sometimes it's called sea caviar because it has exactly the same texture as caviar. It's quite common actually in Japan, but very rare outside of Japan. In fact, they only recently learned how the technology to farm this in Japan. It was very tricky because it normally only was harvested from the wild. But I visited the place, the largest farm for this on Kumejima, small island in Okinawa. And it's the biggest producer in the world now. And it pumps, and the trick is it pumps in deep sea water, which is very chilly, from a few kilometers offshore. And they hand sort it. And then, I mean, it's just to go back actually, it's incredibly difficult to transport umibudo because if you freeze it, it liquefies. If you brine it or dry it out, it loses all that texture and flavor. And it needs to be kept quite warm, so you can't air freight it. But I think as soon as someone cracks these issues, it's going to go global, and it's going to be an amazing ingredient that everyone is going to fall in love with. Just served very simply with a little bit of ponzu, it's incredible. So these, I've fallen in love with Japanese potatoes. This was at a very famous shochu distillery in southern Kyushu. Shochu is the clear Japanese spirit made often from sweet potatoes, among other things. Again, that has huge potential, I think, to follow in the wake of sake, which is already very familiar in the Western kitchens. Shochu is such an adaptable and approachable spirit. And these potatoes, I think, are really fascinating. They're one of the key ingredients for a certain type of shochu. The one on the right is the Okinawan purple sweet potato, the beni imo. On Okinawa, they take full advantage of the amazing color. It looks like, I don't know, Prince's underpants or something. They use this to make all manner of quite lurid cakes and desserts. And of course, the ultimate tribute, Kit Kat. Still on Okinawa, a kind of cousin of shochu is awamori, but instead of being made from sweet potatoes or other grains, it's made with long grain rice from Thailand and with black koji instead of yellow koji. It's a really, really funky spirit. Can be sometimes quite aggressive, not to everyone's taste, can be a bit medicinal perhaps. But the aged varieties, and there's a 10-year-old there, this is at a distiller called Zuisan on Okinawa, the main island. The 10-year-old is amazing, rich, almost chocolatey, single malt kind of flavor. And they age them underground in these natural limestone caves to maintain a regular temperature. They also, this is the Awamori Queen this year, who I met and was very charming. Don't bother with the ones with the poisonous habu snake in them. That's just kind of a tourist thing, predominantly for Chinese tourists, to do with potency. We also visited this year, we visited Obama, which is a town on the Shimabara Peninsula in western Kyushu. And I love Obama. It's an onsen resort because of one particular restaurant. It's quite common in Kyushu to cook food, as we've seen, using the steam from volcanic onsen water. And this restaurant, Mushigamaya, it's a seafood restaurant, and you choose your living seafood. They take it outside and they drop it into the steam, and it's cooked in seconds. It's absolutely amazing. And outside, very quickly, was this stall selling ika, squid crackers with soy sauce, which I think was the most umami-rich substance I've ever tasted. These were incredible, these crackers. If they could sell them in bags, they would make millions. Okay, this was very fascinating, I think. This is a type of cuisine very special to Nagasaki, which some of you may have heard of, called shippoku ryori. I think it's kind of the original fusion cuisine. We have Tetsuya-san in the audience today, who we're going to hear from in a bit, but I think this predated him by a few centuries. It's a special celebratory kind of meal in Nagasaki, very elaborate, very expensive. And it occurred in Nagasaki because the city has a very special history, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. Japan was closed to the world for nearly 3 centuries, but Nagasaki was the only port that was allowed to trade with the West through a strange set of circumstances. This happened to be the Dutch. So Shipokuriori, it blends Chinese cuisine with Japanese cuisine, because the Chinese were also trading in Nagasaki, and Dutch cuisine, not hitherto particularly well-renowned, but it blends elements into one meal. Like everything on Kyushu, it's unusually sweet, has a very sugary profile, and blends sweet and savory throughout the courses, which is very interesting. Actually, it reminded me a bit of the food from Shanghai, if any of you have eaten there. The best thing was the fish in the foreground here, which is long-tooth grouper, or kue, incredibly rare and expensive fish, probably more expensive than tuna. There's a couple of more dishes. This was the special type of tempura in Shipokuriori, which is made with egg yolks only, which I'd not heard of before. And it's not home cooking, as you can see. This kind of dish is usually served in very exclusive ryotai, like this one called Hashimoto in Nagasaki. Very quick one. I'm sure you're all very aware already of the amazing range of citrus fruits in Japan. Yuzu, of course, is everywhere nowadays in Western cuisine. This is Hyuganatsu, which is another Kyushu citrus fruit. And what's really special about it is you can eat the white part, you can eat the pith, which is very sweet as well. It's really an incredible fruit. In Nagoya, less obviously appealing, Nagoya is famous in Japan for its insect cuisine. Actually, the Japanese, there are a few regions in Japan where they eat insects and have done for centuries, in some cases having to survive in times of hardship. These are, they normally cook them with soy sauce and sugar in a style called tsukudani. These are crickets, which is a very common insect eaten in Nagoya, Nagano, excuse me, not Nagoya, Nagano Prefecture. This is my friend Tsutomi-san cooking in his kitchen at the shop where he serves various insects to eat. He also gave me very kindly some of this to try. It's a type of tea made from the excrement of silkworm. So it's silkworm shit tea, basically. It was actually really good, although I did draw a line at these. Didn't taste those, and neither did my children. Similarly, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the next food I'm going to show you. Funazushi. This is the venue. So for those who don't know, nare zushi is a very traditional way of preserving fish and sometimes game meats dating back hundreds of years, and they're preserved in steamed rice. And this is, in many ways, the origin of sushi, actually, a way to preserve rice before refrigeration. There's only one place still specializing in funazushi, and funa is a freshwater carp from nearby Lake Biwa, which they use for this. And there's only one company left in Japan. It's called Kitashina, and incredibly, it's been going for nearly 400 years. It has its 400th anniversary, this company. And this is the shop. In 2019, it will turn 400. It's still in the same family, which is not unusual in Japan. So first, the carp are packed in salt for a year, then removed and cleaned and dried and packed in cooked rice. There are no added fungus or anything else added. It's the lactic acid from the rice ferments and preserves the fish. And they leave that in the rice for 2 years, no refrigeration. And ideally, the fish are caught, females, with their roe intact, so it looks absolutely spectacular when they prepare it and present it like this. Unfortunately, it really, really stinks. I'm almost having a muscle memory of the smell of it standing here looking at it. and it has an extremely sour flavor, really lip-puckeringly sour. I made the mistake, as I always do with these kind of things, of taking a whole slice in one go, and that nearly put me off for life. But if you nibble it with a little bit of sake, I promise you it's fantastic. And I really hope that this company survives and keeps going, because it's such an important element of Japan's culinary heritage. And we were very fortunate as well this year to go a bit off the beaten track to the prefecture of Shimane and the town of Matsue on the banks of Lake Shinji. Not that many tourists go there, but the lake is famous for 7 delicacies, seafoods. Above all, it's probably most famous for the shijimi clam, which is fished, like dragged from the bed of the lake using these incredibly heavy cages. The cage alone weighs about 25 kilos, but it needs that to be able to dig through the lake bed. And the classic way of eating these clams is in a miso soup, and they have the most astonishing umami flavor, like nothing else. They're so meaty and rich with amino acids. Everyone at the moment is talking about koji, it seems, in the Western restaurant world, and fermentation techniques. Koji is a domesticated fungus, Aspergillus orzai. It's used in so many food products in Japan, of course. Miso, shoyu, sake, shochu. I think also sometimes on katsuobushi and many, many other foods. Natto, perhaps. And in Niigata, they have this amazing store dedicated to koji products. It's called Furumachi Koji. And they even have beauty products, of course, with koji in. Really interesting amazakis, which is a kind of a sweeter, thicker, low or non-alcoholic sake. Amazing flavor, so refreshing. The one on, I think it's the one on the right, has added lactic bacteria, so it's incredibly refreshing. And I think amazaki as well, like shochu and aomori, has huge potential internationally, although it's still not that well known. And koji is actually fairly common in domestic kitchens in Japan, used to tenderize and marinate meats. And they even sell it ready-made for this purpose. It's a koji marinade. And again, I don't know why this isn't in every supermarket around the world, because it sweetens and tenderizes chicken is especially great with this shio koji. And I got fascinated by koji. And every time I thought I'd reached the end of the quest to find out what it actually was, someone would say, oh no, this isn't actually the koji, you have to go somewhere else. So I ended up going all the way to northern Tokyo, Japan, to visit one of the 6 companies that are allowed by law, because it's quite a dangerous process, to manufacture koji kin, which is the actual spores themselves. Here you can see them being propagated on a tray of rice in quite a traditional manner. It's a beautiful color, right? And this is koji kin itself. And this is then used to make, Melinda would know this much better than I, to make malted rice, which is called koji, which is then used in the sake making process. But they even, at this place, make koji ice cream from it, which had a wonderful, sweet, yeasty flavor. Pretty good, actually. So finally, we got to Hokkaido. And for me, Hokkaido means 2 things. Uni, sea urchin, and melons. Of course, it also means Michel Bras to me as well. This is my melon farmer friend, Tomomichi Kobayashi of IK Melons, perhaps the best melons in Japan. He, after a lot of pressure, I got him to admit that. And he explained, I've never really understood the Japanese obsession with melons. They can routinely pay $100 for a pear, right, in the Depachika department store food halls. I never quite understood this. But apparently it's just because they ripen, the time of ripening coincides with the biggest gift-giving season in Japan. So just by coincidence, they make the perfect gift during Obon in August. It's one of the biggest holidays. But apparently, appearance is much more important with these melons than flavor. For me, they're actually a bit too sweet. I didn't say this to him, but And he explained, he showed us these two melons, and you can probably guess which one fetches the $100 and which one doesn't. The finer webbing is very, very important. And you can't see it, but it must have the T-shaped stalk on the top. If it doesn't have that stalk, you lose 50% of the value of the melon. And I think the record price, every year there's an auction every summer, the record price for a pair of these melons, $30,000. And my favorite thing in the world to eat, probably uni. Again, a really interesting story on Hokkaido. I think Hokkaido uni are the best in the world. And there are two main types. The Murasaki, the purple, the big ones there you can see in the chaps and the fishermen's hands. And the Bafun uni, which you can just see the top of. They're also called, I'm being very vulgar in this speech, but they're also called horse shit uni because they kind of look a bit like horse shit. But the Bafuns, the one on the bottom, are considered the very best tasting by connoisseurs. But unfortunately, they're dying out. It used to be they made up about 90% of the catch, and the purples were about 10%, and that's completely reversed now. So only 10% are Bafuni. In my humble opinion, I think it's one of the greatest flavors in the world. If you imagine if mermaids made vanilla ice cream, that's kind of how it tastes. But that's insider, Bafuni. Doesn't look so appealing there, but I mean, this was one of the best days of my life, I have to say. I even wore a jumper to match, to color coordinate with the uni. Finally, I just thought you'd be interested in what the best meal of the whole trip was. And it was this crab in not much more than a fisherman's hut on the far eastern town of Rouse on Hokkaido. Alive when we arrived and cooked to order, and it tasted like the most super intense reduced bisque. It was just incredible. Oh, one last thing before I go. I've mentioned several Japanese food products which I think have huge potential around the world. But I'm going to end, and another one would be maybe yuzu kosho. It's an amazing condiment made from the pith and peel of yuzu with salt and chili. It's already starting to get interest in the States, I know. But I'm going to end on one food product which I suspect has absolutely no potential whatsoever outside of Japan. It is very, very Japanese. However much the world loves Japanese food, I don't think they're ever really going to embrace squid beaks, which are on sale in like petrol stations in some parts of Japan alongside the coffee. Get us some coffee and some candy and some squid beaks. They don't even look appealing. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Michael. We're all getting extremely hungry. It's a great pleasure now to be able to introduce a great American chef. David Kinch is the chef and owner of restaurant Manresa in Los Gatos, California, which has been awarded 3 stars by the Guide Michelin. And in 2012, Manresa was named one of San Pellegrino's top 50 restaurants in the world. And in 2013, Bon Appetit magazine called Manresa one of the 20 most important restaurants in America. GQ magazine named David Kinch Chef of the Year in 2011. David is a master at incorporating Japanese flavors and concepts into a contemporary American cuisine. Please welcome David Kinch. Thank you. Wherever you like. Yeah, here's good. Okay. Yeah, I'm also going to introduce Tetsuya Wakuda to join us on the panel before David speaks. Tetsuya is a Japanese-born chef and owner of Tetsuya's in Sydney, Australia, and Wakugin restaurant in Singapore. Tetsuya was named Restaurant of the Year by the Sydney Morning Herald in 2008 and has consistently been amongst the top 50 restaurants in the world for many years. His Singapore restaurant, Wakuda, has been awarded 1 star by the Guide Michelin, in addition to being named one of San Pellegrino's top 50 Asian restaurants in 2016. Chef Wakuda's Asian heritage and insatiable curiosity combine to create incredible, soulful dishes that exude passion in every bite. So please welcome Tetsuya, Wakuda, and join us on the panel. Would you like to join us here? Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you for the kind words. Very much appreciated. It's a pleasure to be here. Ohayo gozaimasu. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous ce matin, and thank you. It's a really great pleasure to be here. We're all inspired by Japan, but I have to say, seeing the people that have been up here earlier today, they've had a lot to say with intelligence, very thought-provoking, and with all their experience. These are legends that have influenced me my entire life, and it's just a real thrill to be here, not only about Japan, but the people who spoke before. Many of the speakers here, they can speak with much more eloquence than I can about Japan's influences, and there has been a lot been said today, but one of the things I wanted to talk about was, as a young cook, pre-internet, pre-social media, how I came to know about Japanese cuisine and Japanese influence and the impact it had on me. I'm first of all a cook. I can remember exactly when, why, and where that I fell in love with cooking, and the whys I fell in love with cooking. I fell in love with the therapy of working with my hands, being lost in my thoughts, how every day was different, and most of all, the pleasures of pleasing people and getting some sort of satisfaction and feedback from the work that I did every day. It gives me great pleasure, even to this day, as an older cook after working for 40 years in the business, it still gives me great pleasure to go to work every day for these reasons. Growing up, I dreamed as a cook of many opportunities that could come my way. I would meet interesting people, I would travel around the world, I would see new cultures, and I would learn. And I was afforded the opportunity to cook. And I remember the first time that I had something that was Japanese. Do you remember the first time that you had something Japanese cuisine, the first bit of wonder that you had? For me, it was sushi, probably very common, sushi sashimi. And I was taken by surprise in many ways. Eating with your hands, the ritual of it, the complex simplicity, which seems to run through everything that happens in Japanese cuisine. And most of all, how so few ingredients, such simple and humble ingredients, 2 ingredients, maybe 3, that the synergy of these ingredients were so much greater than the sum of them added together separately. Just this absolute minimalism and the balance that it had. I remember going to stage in Europe in the early 80s and then again in the early 90s. In every restaurant that I worked in, there was always at least one Japanese cook. He was quiet, he was efficient, he worked very, very hard with his head down, and he's always absorbing knowledge. And as mentioned earlier, they always had the sharpest knives. They made everything that we were working with in our Western kitchens almost primitive by design. Very impressive. They worked and they went back to Japan, and my experience has been, and I think it'd be hard to argue, that some of the greatest Italian and French restaurants in the world outside of Italy and France you will find here in Japan, simply for those reasons. I remember coming across the first book of Japanese cuisine in English. It was by a gentleman named Shizuo Tsuji. It was called Japanese Cooking, A Simple Art. I still have my original copy from the early 80s, and I do believe it just got reprinted again. It had a great influence on me. It had a quiet authority, a gentle guidance through basic principles that resonated with a young cook, which not yet touched on what we all strive for as cooks. I worked in New York. I was a young cook working in New York at a restaurant of renown, and the owner took a vacation and he went to Japan for a month. He came back a transformed man. He turned the restaurant in a big U-turn because of everything that he saw and everything he was influenced. That intrigued his entire team. Shorter cooking times, of color, freshness, of the complex simplicity that we all marvel at. The fact at that time everything was on a white plate, and all of a sudden we were paying attention to serving vessels. I remember coming to Japan and working and living here for the first time. That was in Fukuoka back in 1988 and 1989. I became totally immersed. I started understanding that you can't just copy and be artificial, but being immersed in a culture is a great part in understanding of how food works and to make it as natural as possible. A great lesson for a young cook. I remember learning about food stalls, onsens, the complexity of regionalism. It wasn't just about what we would find in Japanese restaurants in the United States, but that the complex regionalism of Italy and France was there in Japan, ready to be learned about and to be understood. We hung out with the team. We talked about the relative difference and similarities between the San Francisco Giants and the Fukuoka Dai Hawks. It was a very important part of what we did every day. I learned about restaurants in Japan where fugu, where you would go to a restaurant and every course you had a piece of the fish, a part of the body of the fish. Where we came from, you never repeated ingredients. It was boring. But here we learned the concept that there was a story. You were learning the story of this fish. It was being told through various parts of the animal, through various cooking styles that ran the gamut of all the different ways that they cook and prepare food in Japan. And by the end of this meal, it wasn't a story of repetition, but it was a story of inspiration on what products can truly be. One of the things that I was impressed with was it's one thing to catch a piece of fish, and then the job is not done. I learned that after a boat comes in and there's a piece of fish, getting it to the door of a restaurant is more than half the battle. And it's something that in Western cuisines I've seen where the product is abused once it is procured. And in Japan, I learned of a tremendous reverence for the product, getting it to transporting it to where it was being taken. I learned that ice burns just like heat does. I learned that an ice cube with a sharp edge will bruise a delicate flesh of a fish. Things that I never even thought about before, but the attention to detail was revelatory to me. I then spent some time at the Japanese Culinary Academy, which is a loose group of chefs in Kyoto that was headed by a gentleman named Yoshihiro Murata, who took a lot of time and money to invite a series of chefs over many years, Western chefs, to come and to be exposed to the fundamental tenets of what Japanese cuisine is and how it can be spread around the world. We, of course, learned about umami and dashi, miso and the fermentation processes, health, the importance of health in everyday dishes, the importance of seasonality and exceptional products, which everybody has touched upon, the complex simplicity of the pleasures of the eye, presentation, and non-symmetry, which we started to talk about earlier, the importance of the serving vessels being just as important to a pleasing experience, textures, becoming paramount as part of the cuisine. And for me, the single most important thing that resonated with me was the concept of balance, not just sweet, salt, bitter, the five senses, but everything, through the eyes, even hearing food, touching food played a factor. That flavors can satiate and excite, yet without a minimal amount of fat, which is also a revelatory experience. I take all these, and then we say, how do we incorporate this into our lives as cooks, take them into our own individual worlds? in our restaurants, wherever they may be, in Europe, the United States, other parts of Asia. And for me, the battle was not to create a fusion cuisine, to have, artificial or superficial expressions of Japanese product and/or techniques and mash it together. For me, it was to take these fundamental tenets about the similarities that exist in great cooking everywhere and how I can incorporate it into what we do at our restaurants, but you don't see it. You don't know it's there. And that we still honor what I feel are really important aspects of what a truly great restaurant is. That is a vision of a single person and also a reflection of the time and place that it is, the terroir. For me, being a part of the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Rim, is a big part of our fascination with Japan. Lastly, the role of a chef, as Olivier has touched on for the past 2 days, that there has been a tremendous democratization of what fine dining and hospitality is, social media, the way we get our information and data nowadays. There is great food everywhere on many different levels. It's no longer just for the privileged few. And chefs need to embrace these roles. The things that Japan can teach us, and I'm not just talking about dashi, but I'm talking about hospitality and the caring for people, direct eye contact, a smile that is genuine. Everybody knows what a fake smile is when you walk into a restaurant, but everybody recognizes a genuine smile too. And it is a skill that is hard to teach, but it can be taught. There was once a great chef who said that success can be born out of arrogance, maybe out of stubbornness, and just the will to just try and not fail. But greatness comes from humility. And to me, that is the single greatest thing that I've learned about my experiences in Japan. And that's something that we tried to live through at the restaurant and teach our staff. We have a great responsibility, not just to cook food, but sustainability, health, because of our reach and all different levels of good cooking, understanding the links in the chain, understanding the links that came before us, where we are now, and our responsibilities for future generations. We have a lot that we need to accomplish other than just making the next generation cooks better than us. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Want to join us over here? Please. Tetsuya, may we ask you now to share an Asian perspective with us? We had hoped we'd have a little more time for questions, and we'll see if we do at the end.
Well, honored to be here. So, and particularly, I'm sorry, my voice is getting a little bit cold. So, and my idol chef is here. So, it's a very special day for me. And well, it's how actually the people actually. I'm actually not Japanese cook or chef. I left Japan about 34 years ago, 1982. And happened to be I met French trained chef in Sydney, Australia. And that's my started actually cooking career. And I never, in that moment, I never actually to be a chef or cook. And met and through over the years and visit Paris, and also particularly first chef I met, Chef Tony Bioson. He trained in Chef Trago. So he started when I actually worked for him, and he occasionally cooked for me. And it's just that time was, for me, so new about French cuisine. And that's my everything start. And people think my cuisine, it's in Sydney, is the fusion. But I'm still don't know what is a fusion, more like confusion, really. I mean, everybody sort of nowadays inspired by, okay, my based on, no matter what, even still today, is European French based. Because I born here, my palate, I try to make like what I had in Paris or chefs' cuisines or French cuisine and the individual chefs, and I admired over the years and try to be how close, but never. It's my palate. And naturally also, how influenced people saying, how you use Japanese influence, actually that is ingredients or method or using dashi to all that. It's, for me, it's natural thing because I'm born and my palate I have. And my mother was actually a very good cook, only Japanese cuisine. So I had a taste for it. And that French and also, I don't have no boundary. And I didn't have Pacific train except one chef. And then after that, just read a lot of books and then travel a lot. US, Europe, Italy. And so it's naturally sort of inspired everything. And so has to be this is French, has to be this is Japanese, has to be Thai and so on. My actual individual dish, all sorts of things in it. It's not sometimes obvious, so much like looks like a Japanese, no. And so still we use French technique and everything else, but add ingredients, each individual. It can be Japanese, can be even Thai sauce, or either juice of anchovy to all sorts. And for what I express to my cooking is long as freshest ingredients and highest quality. That matters the first. And then I really want guests to enjoy and also so sort of like, excite. If my food excites guests' palate, that is everything else. So often people asking, so what is this? This is French? Or some people think it's Japanese, but whatever people felt, then I'm okay about it. Everyone try to categorize, what is it, what is it? Almost every day, some guests ask, and even my staff, so what should I say? Food. That's, for me, it's European. But, sometimes, people change over my own business when I started here in Sydney about 30 years ago. Now, 30 years been doing business, my own business. And then big thing over the years we changed, particularly last 10 years. It's basically, I think everyone agree with it. All guests are nowadays the critic. Social media, whatever, that's the time, that's fine. But I really expect the people to come. Sometimes you notice that, like, try to analyze, what is this? Before eat, it's, first of all, take photos. I think everyone experiences that. Everyone take photos for quite a few minutes. And then, it's lighting. And break down first, what's in it? Unfortunately, that is a time, so I'm not complaining, but that's, I think, I like to share with, audience here. And, but still, wonderful business to be in. And often, also, just before I said, what cuisines and also the, why you don't cook Japanese? Actually, often lately, you can combine together. So why you don't cook Japanese? I'm not try to be or pretend Japanese chef. Okay, it's basic Japanese, I can do it. But, often nowadays in Australia, some Australian team here as well. And sashimi something, shabu-shabu something, it's in a dish. And something, I don't do it, or tempura something. It's, it's, somebody said Australia is American actually food critic. Naturally fusion cuisine, that is Australian, because people saying Australian cuisine, it's modern Australian, models, people say that too, short term. And still, Australia is a very, very multicultural country. And people, how influenced or not, when a little child, even lunchtime today in the weekend, maybe go to Yamcha. Nighttime, go to French, Italian, Lebanese, Japanese, Chinese, Thai. In Australia, we don't have really like France or Italy, actual long history food culture. But naturally we eat. So all young chefs come to Australia when it comes to industry. Even interesting to saying, naturally people cook. It's all sorts of knowledge they have because we have a palate. So a lot of international hotels hire the Australian young chefs because they know about average each cuisine. That's my background. That's what I'm saying to you is the sort of this is Australia. So naturally people asking about it, what we do and sense of the cuisine, which is a very multicultural sort of thing. So what I do is that's all it is. And so I don't put the tag onto it. And Australia is actually, or myself, it keeps changing. And particularly now, the biggest thing now, it's a globe, even all these French chefs as well. Naturally, everyone using how influence, but because people travel, people experience, so they not learn, just naturally into the your system in your body and palate. So when you're doing, every day doing certain things, but I tasted something in Japan and naturally incorporate. And that's what I see. And it's now, this particular discussion is how influenced and Japanese cuisine. I mean, Japanese cuisine, which is, it's not influenced, but again, naturally everybody absorbed it. And it's really honor to be being Japanese and then see that. And today's lifestyle also, people's palate change. And that's why this is real natural evolving is each individual cuisine. And just finally, just I want to say to here in hospitality industry and all chefs, and actually how I am here is actually all these wonderful, I've been idol to a lot of chefs here, and I learned, I think every chefs go to restaurants or individual restaurants in Globe, and when you have good food and then inspire, and then when you come back, not try to be, I'm better than somebody, or create same sort of food. It's not, just inspire, and we have everybody. We are not liable. We have a great friendship, and I learned, and they all individual chefs gave me a lot. So I want to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, speakers. I'm so sorry, but we will not have time for questions from the audience at this time. But the speakers will be available during the marketplace, so you can go directly and ask them your particular questions. Thank you again, and it was really interesting, all of your talks. So please, Patrick, you stay.